The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Rachel Winters didn't notice. She was too focused on the way the man across from her kept touching his left earlobe whenever he described the blood. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible. The kind of tell she'd learned to watch for in her 15 years of investigative journalism. But something about it made her stomach tighten in a way she couldn't quite name. "Tell me again," she said, her voice steady despite the growing unease creeping up her spine. "About the angle of the wound." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The knife went in just below the rib cage, angled upward, punctured the lung first. She would have tried to scream, but all that came out was this wet, gurgling sound. Rachel's pen hovered over her notebook. She'd interviewed hundreds of witnesses in her career, sat across from victims' families, even a few killers. But something about the precision in his voice made the small office feel smaller, the walls pressing in like a closing fist. Outside, Chicago's February wind rattled the frosted windows of the converted warehouse building. She'd chosen this location herself. Neutral territory. A borrowed office from a friend who worked in commercial real estate. Third floor, privacy. She'd thought it was smart, professional. Now, watching the man who called himself David Chen settle deeper into the worn leather chair, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The Vanessa Hartley case had haunted Chicago for 12 years. A 24-year-old graduate student found dead in her Lincoln Park apartment on a Tuesday morning in January 2013. No forced entry, no witnesses, no DNA evidence that led anywhere. The case had gone cold within months, another unsolved tragedy in a city full of them. Rachel had been 26 when it happened, a junior reporter at the Tribune, hungry for the story that would make her name. She'd covered the case obsessively, interviewed Vanessa's roommates, her professors, her grieving parents. She'd written a series that won her a regional journalism award, but brought her no closer to the truth. Then, 3 days ago, an email had arrived in her inbox. Simple subject line: "I saw what happened to Vanessa Hartley." The message was brief. A man, claiming he'd been a delivery driver in the area that night, had seen someone entering her building, said he'd been too afraid to come forward at the time but couldn't live with the guilt anymore. He wanted to tell his story. He wanted to help. Rachel had been skeptical. She'd received dozens of false leads over the years, attention seekers and conspiracy theorists. But something about the email felt different. The details were specific, but not too specific. The tone was apologetic, almost desperate. She'd done her due diligence, background check came back clean. David Chen, 46 years old, worked in logistics, no criminal record. She'd agreed to meet. Now, sitting across from him in the borrowed office with its single window and cheap Venetian blinds, Rachel felt the weight of that decision like a stone in her chest. "You said you were making a delivery," she said, scanning her notes. "At 11:45 p.m. to the building next door." "That's right." His hands were folded in his lap, calm, too calm. "Late delivery. Happens sometimes in my line of work." I parked on the street, grabbed the package from the back of my van. "And that's when you saw someone?" "A man, entering through the front door of Vanessa's building. He had a key." Rachel wrote this down, though she'd already typed the same words into her laptop 20 minutes ago. She was stalling now, trying to understand the wrongness she felt pooling in her gut like poison. "Describe him." David's eyes went distant. like he was watching a film projected on the far wall. Tall, maybe 6 feet, dark coat, wool, I think, the kind that's expensive but doesn't draw attention. He moved quickly, but not like he was running, like he had purpose, like he belonged there. Did you see his face? Not clearly, he kept his head down, but when he reached for the door, I saw his hand. He was wearing gloves, leather, brown leather gloves, even though it wasn't that cold that night. Rachel's pen stopped. The temperature that night was 31 degrees. Right, David said without missing a beat. But it wasn't the bitter cold we get sometimes. It was damp, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. He was smart to wear gloves, not for the cold though. The way he said it made Rachel's throat tighten. Not for the cold, for the fingerprints. She kept her face neutral, a skill she'd perfected over years of difficult interviews. What happened next? I delivered my package, came back to my van. That's when I saw him leaving. Maybe 20 minutes later. He walked fast this time, not running, but close. Got into a car parked 2 blocks away. What kind of car? Dark sedan, Honda Accord, I think. Maybe 2010, 2011. Rachel nodded, writing. You remember a lot of details for something that happened 12 years ago. For the first time, something flickered across David's face. Not quite irritation, more like satisfaction. Some things you don't forget, he said quietly. Some nights replay in your mind until every detail is burned there, you know what I mean? She did. She'd covered enough trauma to understand how memory worked, how certain moments crystallized while others faded. But this felt different. This felt rehearsed. You said you were too afraid to come forward at the time, Rachel said. Why? I had my reasons. Family. Immigration status wasn't sorted yet. Didn't want the attention. But now I can't sleep. I see her face sometimes. Vanessa. I looked her up after, saw her picture in the news. Young, so young. And I could have helped. Maybe if I'd come forward sooner. His voice trailed off, but his eyes stayed locked on hers. They were dark, almost black in the dim office light. Rachel felt something in those eyes, something that made her want to push her chair back, put more distance between them. Instead, she leaned forward. You said you see her face, but you never saw Vanessa that night. You saw a man entering the building. I saw her picture after. Right. Rachel tapped her pen against the notebook, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. Let me ask you something, David. In all the news coverage, did you ever read about the exact nature of her injuries? I know she was stabbed, but did you read about the specific wound pattern, the angle, the location? He was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, Rachel heard the wind pick up outside, heard the old building creak and settle. She heard her own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. I might have, he said finally. It was all over the news. It wasn't? Rachel's voice was steady now, certain. The police held back those details. They never released the exact nature of the wounds, not to the press, not to anyone. David's hand went to his earlobe again, touched it lightly, almost a caress. The knife went in below the rib cage. Rachel continued, her words measured and deliberate. Angled upward. That detail was never made public. So, how did you know that, David? The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, growing louder, then fading away. The normal sounds of the city. The sounds Rachel suddenly wanted to be closer to. David's smile returned, and this time it was different, wider, real. "You're very good at your job, Rachel." The way he said her name made her skin crawl. She hadn't told him her last name was Winters. The email exchange had been professional, formal, but he'd used her first name from the moment he walked in, and she'd been too focused on the interview to notice. "You never saw a man entering that building, did you?" Rachel said quietly. "No. You weren't making a delivery. No. You were the one who entered. You had the key because Vanessa gave it to you. You knew her." David leaned back in his chair, and the leather creaked under his weight. "We met at a coffee shop. She was studying. I was looking." She had this way of tilting her head when she concentrated, like a bird. "I watched her for weeks before I finally said hello." Rachel's hand moved slowly toward her bag, toward her phone. But David noticed. He always noticed. "She invited me up for coffee one night," he continued, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. "Gave me a key after the third date. Said she trusted me. Isn't that funny? Trust." "David," Rachel said, keeping her voice calm, professional, like this was still an interview, like she was still in control. "I think we should continue this conversation at the police station. I have a contact in the door's locked." The words were simple, matter of fact. Rachel's eyes moved to the door behind him. Heavy wood. She'd locked it herself when he arrived, wanting privacy for the interview. The deadbolt she'd turned from the inside. The key she'd left in the lock. Except the key wasn't in the lock anymore. "I took it while you were setting up the recorder," David said, watching her face. "You were so focused on getting the angle right on your phone. Wanted good audio, professional." Rachel's mind raced through scenarios, options, escapes. The window behind her was 3 floors up. The office next door was empty, her friend had told her, would be empty all week. No one knew she was here. She'd been careful about that too. Protecting her source. Protecting the integrity of the interview. Protecting herself right into a trap. "Why did you reach out to me?" she asked, and was surprised her voice didn't shake. "Because you never forgot her. All these years, you kept writing about Vanessa. Little updates, anniversary pieces. You kept her alive. I appreciated that. And you wanted to confess." "No." David stood slowly, and Rachel's body went rigid. "I wanted to be seen, really seen, not as a delivery driver, not as the shadow in the hallway, as the person who understood her completely. The last person to really see her. You killed her. I set her free." His voice was soft, almost gentle. She was trapped in that little life. Grad school, part-time job, student loans, going nowhere. I showed her something real, something pure. In those final moments, she understood. I saw it in her eyes. Rachel's fingers closed around her phone in her bag. If she could just unlock it, dial 911, they could trace the call even if she couldn't speak. But David was moving now, circling the desk, and her window of action was closing. "You're going to write about this," he said. "That's why I chose you. You'll get it right. The story, I mean, the real story." "I'll write it," Rachel said, her voice finally betraying her fear. "I'll write exactly what you tell me. Every detail. But I need to get out of here first. I need to—" "You're not leaving, Rachel." He was close now. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. Close enough that she could see her own reflection in his dark eyes. "The problem with witnesses," he said quietly, is that they only see part of the story. They see the before or the after, but never the during. Never the moment when everything changes. Rachel moved. She threw her coffee cup at his face, cold liquid and ceramic exploding against his cheek. In the same motion, she lunged for the door, her fingers scrabbling for the deadbolt, for any way out. But he was faster. His hand caught her wrist, and she felt the wrongness of his grip, too tight, too practiced. This was muscle memory. He'd done this before. She screamed, loud and long and desperate, hoping someone, anyone, would hear. But the building was mostly empty, converted offices that sat vacant more often than not, and the wind outside swallowed her voice. Vanessa screamed too, David said, almost conversationally, but quieter. Because of the lung. You understand that now, don't you? The details matter. Rachel's free hand found the lamp on the desk. Heavy, brass base. She swung it hard, caught him across the temple. He stumbled back, and she had a moment, one precious moment, where the door was within reach. She got the deadbolt turned, got the door open 6 inches before his weight slammed against it, crushing it shut, crushing her hope. "I didn't want to rush this," he said, and she could hear the disappointment in his voice. "But you're making me rush." Rachel's mind fragmented into 1,000 desperate thoughts. Her apartment, empty. No one would notice she was missing for days. Her editor, who thought she was following a different lead. Her mother in Phoenix, who called every Sunday. It was only Wednesday. "Please," she said, and hated the word even as it left her mouth. "Please, I have a family." Vanessa had a family too, parents who loved her, a sister. It didn't save her. He was pulling her away from the door now, back toward the center of the office. Rachel fought, clawed, kicked, but he was stronger, and she was running out of moves, running out of time. Then her foot connected with his knee, hard and precise, and he went down. She didn't wait. She ran for the window, knowing it was 3 floors up, but not caring, because 3 floors was better than what waited for her here. Her hands found the window latch, frozen from disuse. She pulled, yanked, felt the ancient mechanism resist. David's hand closed around her ankle, but the latch gave. The window opened. Cold February air rushed in, shocking and vital and alive. Rachel pulled herself halfway through, felt his grip tighten, felt him pulling her back. And then she screamed again, not in terror this time, in rage, in refusal. She screamed for Vanessa Hartley, who never got the chance. She screamed for every woman who'd been underestimated, overpowered, silenced. A door slammed somewhere in the building. Footsteps running. A voice calling out. David's grip loosened. Not much, just enough. Rachel didn't think. She pushed herself through the window, caught the fire escape railing, her shoulders screaming in protest as her body weight pulled against the joint. But she held on. She held on as David's face appeared in the window. She held on as the footsteps got closer. She held on as he looked at her one last time, his expression unreadable, and then disappeared back into the office. By the time the security guard reached her, David Chen was gone. By the time the police arrived, only evidence remained. Her phone still recording. His fingerprints on everything he'd touched. And Rachel shaking on a frozen fire escape, alive. The search for David Chen lasted 6 weeks. They found his apartment empty, his job history fabricated, his identity borrowed from a real David Chen who died in a car accident 15 years ago. They found evidence connecting him to 3 other cold cases. Young women, all stabbed, all unsolved, they never found him. Rachel wrote the story. It won awards. It got Vanessa Hartley's case reopened, brought closure to other families, sparked national conversation about cold cases and the women who fell through the cracks. But on quiet nights when the wind rattled her new apartment windows she checked 3 times before bed, Rachel thought about those final moments on the fire escape. How close she'd come. How thin the line between witness and victim. And sometimes, late at night, she wondered if somewhere out there, David Chen was reading her articles, appreciating how she'd gotten every detail right. Proud of his star pupil. The thought never let her sleep.
The scripted casebook remains open. Subscribe to the archive. Share the evidence. Leave your verdict below. Some secrets are better shared.